Hello everyone, this is Ponder on Weather. In this update, we're going to be talking about Tropical Storm Ian expected to rapidly intensify into a major hurricane as it heads into the Gulf early next week. Welcome back everyone, how's it going? Hope everyone is enjoying your weekend out there. This is your morning update. I appreciate all my followers and my new followers. If you are new to the channel and like detailed weather breakdowns on North America and the tropics, go ahead and hit the subscribe button and notification bell to get all my daily updates to keep you ahead of the storm. So let's take a look at the satellite picture this morning. And man, this has been a lot of deep convection around Tropical Storm Ian. Look at the incredible lightning display as this is starting to really intensify now that Fiona is now moving off. And man, this has just been one impressive storm with Fiona as it made landfall yesterday in Nova Scotia, and it made devastating impacts. It took the name Ian because Hermine actually formed right before it off the coast of Africa. And Ian is that dreaded I name storm, which is the most retired storm letter alphabet in the alphabet. So that is definitely concerning, and this is the one that's expected to be a major hurricane as it heads into the Gulf. But first, let's take a look at Fiona, because this was just an incredible, massive beast. I mean, this is about as incredible satellite display that you'll ever see with this ferocious system that made impact yet last night into Nova Scotia, and it's still making devastating impacts. In fact, we actually had up to 63-foot waves out there before it came ashore, and we did have confirmation. We talked about this being hit an historic storm, and it did come to fruition, dropping all the way down to a confirmed 931 millibars in Hart Island. That breaks the old record of 940 millibars back in 1977. So yes, this was in fact an historic storm for Canada up there, and it's still making a mark up there with all the devastating impacts. But let's take a look at the overall setup and how all this came about, right? We talked about, a weaker storm, just kind of a weaker tropical wave tends to favor it and continue to push it more westbound, and that's exactly what happened. But once it got into Puerto Rico, you can actually see it started to strengthen. In fact, it strengthened into a minimal Category 1 hurricane. Unfortunately, it made the turn and it was moving very slow at the time, 7-8 miles an hour, and it dumped an extensive amount of rain, 20 if not almost 30 inches in some isolated spots, and they're still dealing with all the power outages for them. Made a secondary landfall in the Dominican Republic, then it made lots of impacts in the Grand Turks, and then rapidly intensified into a Category 4 hurricane, and then it made a beeline northbound, accelerated at 46 miles an hour, and was just an incredible impact for the Atlantic Canada. But finally, we can actually say goodbye to Fiona, but unfortunately, we got to say hello to another storm, and this is Tropical Storm Ian, which is now currently a 45-mile-per-hour tropical storm. It's located just south of the island of Jamaica. In fact, they've actually got tropical storm watches right now for Jamaica, and then now increasing hurricane watches for the Cayman Islands. So things are going to go downhill pretty quickly into parts of Jamaica, especially on the south side later on this afternoon into the overnight today. Going to be impacting just south of there as we get into the overnight and afternoon time frame on Sunday, but then rapidly intensify into a hurricane moving right over the Cayman Islands on Sunday night going into Monday, and then it impacts portions of Cuba, and then unfortunately it gets into the Gulf of Mexico, and that's where we have a pretty good spread of a cone of uncertainty. But it does in fact intensify to a major hurricane as it gets out into the early morning hours on Wednesday, and potentially makes landfall sometime on Wednesday night going into Thursday into Florida. So this is a definitely concerning system now that the storm has developed. the cone of uncertainty is kind of tightening, but it definitely widens as it gets out into the Gulf and especially headed into Florida. But for the next 72 hours, it's pretty tight notch. It's going to be south of Jamaica and going right over the Cayman Islands and expected to cross over Cuba. So a little bit more uncertainty once it obviously crosses over into the Gulf of Mexico, because we're getting into that 4 or 5 day time frame. But all indications are it is heading towards Florida as a rapidly intensifying hurricane. But for the next 3 days, we're going to have to be dealing with a lot of heavy rainfalls and impacts in portions of Jamaica, especially south of the island there, with very heavy rain, and especially starting to really intensify with a good 4 to 8 inch swath in parts of the Cayman Islands here. So definitely be on the lookout for significant rain amounts in this neck of the woods. And then going into your wind probabilities, yeah, they got you under tropical storm watches down here in Jamaica. But again, most of the heavier impacts are going to be your heavier rains, with at least for Jamaica. But the wind's going to be less of a threat. It's going to be more of a threat as you head into the Cayman Islands, with some of those wind gusts could be approaching hurricane force winds, and then starting to, again, continue to intensify as it lifts west northwest. But the noticeable trend has been a noticeable jog off to the west, right? So now that we have a low-level center, the initial track was just a tropical depression, but now we actually have a tropical storm, and we're starting to get a little bit more of a center, and that center has shifted a little bit further west, which puts the cone of uncertainty moving it a little bit further off west. So the overall shift in the National Weather Service guidance, hurricane guidance, has taken a noticeable bump off to the west and off a little bit further off to the north as well in their latest update. And I think that trend could continue just a tad bit as we get deeper into the 4 and 5 day time span. But where is it going after that? So it's going to be greatly influenced by this significant trough that's going to be diving into the northeast. But we got an incredible display with another significant system now that the runway is fairly clear for Ian to rapidly intensify into. The synoptic setup is very favorable with this particular system, but look at the deep moisture this is going to have to work with. And you can actually see this trough tries to bring in that drier air indicated of this brown shaded areas. But look at the sharp demarcation line here as just the rapidly intensifying storm. It tries to somewhat try to choke it off, but it's going to be having a hard time because Ian is just going to be so powerful. And I think it's going to win and not be able to choke off this system and weaken it even at hardly at all. And so the environment that it's going in is very concerning, because once it gets out into the Gulf of Mexico, again, these are kind of untapped waters. It's been very slow tropical season, but it's been rapidly, really picking up steam as of late in the last couple of weeks. But once it gets out into the Gulf, we got plenty of warm water to work with out into the Gulf of Mexico, especially along the coast with these well above average sea surface anomalies. And what's also concerning is just the very lack of shear that's going over in this environment. So the reason why it's favorable right now, we've got hardly any shear whatsoever depicted in the green shaded area. Less than 5 knots. That's next to nothing. So again, it was being choked off from the outflow of Fiona. Now that Fiona is goodbye, it's all engines go for Ian, as we got full head of steam and open clearing for as it lifts west northwest. And then once it gets into the Gulf, look at that, very concerning, where it could rapidly intensify into a major hurricane, because the shear environment is next to nothing in this middle part of the Gulf of Mexico. In fact, the latest update from the GFS model does in fact enhance that with rapid intensification, dropping it all the way down to a 930 millibar low pressure. So the GFS has been really bullish on this system. That's indicating even a category 4 hurricane and out into the open waters of the Gulf. And look at that, that's a similar setup once it gets into this loop eddy current. That's what happened with Hurricane Michael, and it also happened with Hurricane Katrina. as well. We're talking about some of the the highest water content values of deep ocean waters with these loop currents in this neck of the woods. If you look at the water vapor imagery, this is an incredible display. You can see it's trying to choke off with the drier air to the north, but this is just so going to be tightly wound and in such an impressive type system that it's not going to be able to do that. So this is definitely concerning that a little bit more of a westward shift could put it out into more of the open waters for more of an extended period of time. So what's the loop current, right? So this is the current loop current. Once these systems get inside this particular current, the waters, at least further down, are a lot warmer than they are outside of this current. So anytime a storm definitely gets into this loop current into the Gulf of Mexico, it definitely has a chance to rapidly intensify, and that's the indications that we're seeing. So once it gets out here, it could really start to rapidly intensify, and it's going to be pulling on that shift of the trough. The exact timing of that shifting it more or less northeast, is the uncertainty of the strength of the trough and how far west this is going to be able to go. So that's why the shift in the current guidance has shifted just a tad bit off to the north and to the west. If you can look at it from yesterday, the center part was into Cape Coral. Now it's further into Tampa Bay. So it hasn't shifted that much. That's why we have the spread a little bit further out. But don't get so concerned just on the dead center of this system, because impacts are going to be far, far, far away from the center of this system. But if we expand the view and take a look at the overall tropical storm guidance and where this thing may be going after it impacts Florida, say your Wednesday, Thursday time frame, yeah, it could actually shift northeast with that trough that's going to be diving in. And some indications it actually even could be making a second landfall into portions of North Carolina. But we could be looking at still tropical storm strength. This is the latest GFS ensemble guidance as it rides up the coast of the eastern seaboard as we get deeper into that 7-day time frame. So, and then the overall European ensembles kind of has it the same way. It doesn't lift it as far north, but it still has a potential secondary landfall somewhere in North Carolina time frame. But with tropical storm impacts all the way extended, and with inland flooding too. And another concern with these tropical systems are tornadoes with these devastating storms. So this is going to be a significant event coming up on Wednesday and Thursday in Florida. So let's take a look at the overall rain amounts, because flooding is going to be a huge concern as well with these higher wind gusts moving in and then we could be having those higher winds going push inland as well. So all these areas into Florida and to Georgia and to South Carolina, going into North Carolina and hugging the eastern seaboard, have to be on high alert with this system as well, as this could continue to bring inland flooding and significant wind impacts after it crosses over into Florida. So here's your overall rain swath with higher flooding rains, double-digit totals, where it makes landfall with this system somewhere from between central and a little bit further north into Florida. But we could be looking at inland flooding as well into parts of the southeast and hugging the coastline with this system with Ian. So overall, here's your wind aspect with a possible second landfall somewhere around the second time frame, with higher wind gusts approaching into North Carolina, up the coast into possibly even the Delaware, going into New Jersey area. Some of these winds can be fairly significant, as it still could be tapping into these warmer waters and feeding off that environment. And then the heavier rains with the inland flooding is also going to be that huge concern as it rides up the eastern seaboard as well. So we could be looking at heavier rain swaths in South Carolina, North Carolina, back into Virginia, going into New Jersey, kind of even all the way up to New York, possibly, as we get into that first, second, third time frame. So these, even if you live up here, don't take your eye off the ball with this system, as we're going to be looking at huge impacts for an extended period of time for a good chunk of the southeast with this setup. So I appreciate you guys watching. Do like this video. Definitely leave your comments below. And don't forget to subscribe to my channel. Catch the latest update where I protect you before and after the storm.